Welcome back to Made for More. I am your host, Holly J. Moore. I am a divorce lawyer who is on a mission to help you use the adversity and difficult things in your life to grow and show up as the best version of yourself. I'm joined today by my producer, Erin Bender.
And we will be joined today by Michelle Maize, an author talking about betrayal, how to get over it, not just the betrayed person, but the betrayer, the couple as well. And, I happened to be part of a show with a high-powered, very famous divorce attorney.
So famous.
And so, the conventional wisdom would be that causes for divorce are money and infidelity. What say you, counselor?
Yeah, I hear that all the time, like, oh, cheating must be the biggest reason for divorce. And I'm like, no, it's not. And they're like, money's it. No, it's neither of the two. I think the cheating thing, for sure, that's a symptom of a bigger problem. Something has gone awry in the relationship. This is what I think. I don't know. Maybe Michelle will tell us otherwise. She's much more of an expert than I am. I'm just kind of going off of what I've, heard through the years as a divorce lawyer and what I know about relationships. But generally, cheating is like a symptom of a bigger problem. And money is too. Money stems from issues on control. But all those things are just surface level, and it really comes down to, are both people getting their needs met in the marriage? And if they're not, you're going to see cheating, you're going to see money issues, you're going to see substance abuse, you're going to see pornography addiction, like all the things, right? But those are really just symptoms of bigger underlying problems. Joining us today is Michelle Maize, author of this book, The Betrayal Bind: How to Heal When the Person You Love the Most Hurts You the Worst. Michelle, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yes, you have a very important story to tell, and the work that you do is very important. I'm a divorce lawyer, so, I am involved in sort of the breakdown of relationships quite often. And of course, the issue of infidelity does come up fairly often. So you're doing great work, you're doing important work. But tell us a little bit what compelled you to get into this type of work and write this book.
Well, so way back when I was younger, I was in international relief and development and different things like that. And I just I kept getting bored. I kept feeling like this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. And I had folks ask me if I had ever thought about doing counseling, and I had not ever been exposed to that. So I started reading and researching, and I got really, really interested in that and decided to go get my master's degree in counseling. And at the exact same time that was going on, I was married, and I was in a relationship with somebody who was sexually addicted. And so we did a lot of sort of wandering around trying to find help, could not find good help. That was kind of back before, I think when you use the word sex addict, sexual addiction now, people have some idea. But this was like before it was in our common lexicon at all. Right. People didn't know how to handle it, didn't know how to help. A lot of well-intentioned misguidance happened. And so I went and got my master's degree in counseling, and I finally did find some folks who were able to really help. I ended up leaving my relationship, but went through my own healing process around that. And as I entered private practice, I just thought, we've got to be able to do better at helping people with this issue and understanding what's going on for them. So I entered the field, and I started working with individuals who were dealing with betrayal, and I started working with the whole couple. I'm a systems thinker. So I started working with both the person who was unfaithful, the betrayed partner, and the couple. Okay. And I've done that for over 20 years and worked with that. And again, with the intention of, we need better models, we need better thinking, we need better help for people.
Yeah.
So the book came out of that 20 years of work, and is a new attachment-based model for treating partner betrayal.
Okay. Now, so you'll have to forgive me up front if I speak about some of this incorrectly or something like that, but I do feel like there's a sense in recent years, and again, this is just me like hearing it in the media, sort of getting those sound, the salacious sound bites, but it seems like suddenly there's a lot of sex addicts. And I have wondered, okay, when somebody is caught cheating, is this just the easy scapegoat to be like, well, I'm an addict, I'm a sex addict? Like, is this an excuse? So my question is, one, do you think people use that as an excuse for cheating? And two, is there a difference? If not, is there a difference between a sex addict and someone who has, I guess, what we'll call like a traditional affair?
Yeah. Yeah, what it's making me think about is there's sort of a joke in the field of people who treat sexual addiction as like, is it addiction, addict or asshole?
Right. Yes. Okay. Yes.
What do we
Thank you.
have?
Thank
What do we
you.
have
You
here?
boiled it. Yes. That's the perfect way to ask my question. Yes. Are we talking about addict or asshole? I love it.
Okay.
Yes.
So, and here's the thing. I think, again, when you're dealing with celebrities and people who are public figures, I mean, I'm not going to judge any individual person, but I think probably some of those folks are using that as just a way to manage the fallout of things. I'm
okay.
sure that there is some of that going on.
Okay.
But I think in the field of folks who know how to treat this issue, know how to assess the issue, there's clear differences between somebody who is compulsively using sex in a way that is compulsive, where they are taking risks, they're violating their own value system, they're doing high risk behavior, they're destroying people's lives, they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, all these kinds of things that are very compulsive, versus someone who goes out and has an affair, goes out and maybe has a couple affairs that are not compulsive.
Okay.
And so those are very different things. I think for the person who is the betrayed partner, who's on the side of being betrayed, there's a lot of similarity to what you experience in both of those, but there's also some key differences.
Okay.
So to me, it is really important to kind of know which thing you're dealing with, and then treatment and how you work with that looks very different for each of those.
Okay. Now, my next sort of burning question when I was going through your book is, because you talk about the different types of cheating, I guess. You do talk about anyways, we kind of just talked about that. And a lot of your book discusses the aspect of sexual betrayal, even though it's a multifaceted situation. But can this book speak to people and be a source of healing for people that maybe they never have experienced infidelity? They've never been a betrayed partner in the sense of their partner went out and had sex with somebody else, but they've been really hurt by their partner. Or do you think those are just two entirely different things? A prenuptial agreement, or sometimes called a premarital agreement, is an agreement that two parties enter into before they get married that basically chooses to deviate from state law. It assigns rights and responsibilities regarding assets and debts that are acquired during the marriage. Some common misconceptions about prenups are, one, that they basically doom the marriage to failure, or that it's really planning to divorce, and neither of those things are true. But the real value of a prenup is talking about and creating rules around how the things that you acquire during the marriage are going to be characterized. A prenup can protect things like art collections, real estate portfolios, businesses, all those types of assets. The ideal timeline to get a prenup is not 2 weeks before the wedding. The final version of a prenup has to be presented to the parties 7 days before they actually sign it. So there's like a 7-day waiting period. As soon as you get engaged, you should seek a lawyer's advice and counsel on a prenup and start the process then, because the closer the prenup is signed to the wedding, the more likely that the court is going to think there was some sort of duress involved in that person signing it, and they have to prove that the prenup was signed voluntarily in order for them to be enforced. At More Family Law Group, we represent a lot of high-profile people, celebrities, professional athletes, business tycoons. If you already have a lot of assets, or you think you're going to be acquiring a lot of assets during your marriage, we are the best ones to protect that for you and help you make your marriage stronger. Call More Family Law Group today.
I think there are going to be sections of the book that could be really helpful to anybody in a relationship. I've had a lot of people read the book, like especially when I was writing it, I had some key people reading it who were not had not been unfaithful, had not been betrayed, and they were like,
Yeah.
I learned so much
Yeah.
about my relationship
Right.
and how to be in a relationship from this book. So I think there's a lot that's really valuable for everyone in the book, and then there's going to be some parts that maybe aren't as relevant.
Yeah. Okay. How does you talk about relational betrayal trauma in the book? How does that differ from other types of trauma?
So if we think about, I mean, at this point, I think we're using the word trauma for everything in our culture.
Yes, that's true.
So it's getting a little bit of a ubiquitous word, right? But when we're thinking about relational trauma, and especially trauma that has betrayal at its core, when you're dealing with that, you're dealing with something that is really about the relationship itself changing and becoming threatening
Right.
because of the trauma that has happened in the relationship. And that's different from like a car accident, that's different from, a natural disaster. Those are real traumas for people, but they are different than a relational trauma with somebody who is a trusted person who you are extremely attached to. And that,
Yes.
in my book, what I'm really looking at is like the things that happen with our primary attachment figure, which is our romantic partner.
Right. That was one of the things in the book that really popped out to me is it says partners like past attachment figures are then simultaneously a source of safety and a source of threat, and every interaction is a potentially impossible choice between isolation and dangerous connection. Oh,
Yes.
oh my gosh.
Yes.
I got to tell you, this book is wonderful. There's so much good information in it, but it also gave me a ton of anxiety reading it. I was like, oh my gosh. Like,
A bit of a gut punch, huh?
yes, yes. Yes, because from reading the book, like the experience of finding out that your partner has betrayed you, just the way you wrote about it is so gut-wrenching. Which, also gave me a greater understanding and a greater compassion for people that have endured that. I mean, I think if I took nothing else from your book, I took a lot from your book, but one of the biggest things was how significant that betrayal is and how impactful it is. Primarily, I think because of the attachment piece, right? And how this person is supposed to be a source of safety, and suddenly now it's a threat.
Yeah, and I think the thing that we don't really understand and think about in our culture, I think we think like my partner, I love them and I'm attached to them, but we kind of think it's like a mental thing, like I love them with my mind a little
Yeah.
bit. And I think the thing that we lose sight of is that when you pair bond with somebody, when you form a relationship with them, you actually become a physiological unit.
Yeah.
So your partner regulates your breathing, your heart rate, your blood pressure, your hormones. I mean, they regulate all of that.
Right.
So you literally become physiologically attached to the person. You might have a day where you hate them. It doesn't matter. You're attached.
Right.
Like your
Yeah.
body is attached. So when we're in a physiological unit like that with our partner, and all of a sudden that person is the person who's doing things that destroy trust and create enormous lack of safety in the relationship because the trust is destroyed. It starts to feel dangerous
Yeah.
within the relationship. Now we're going to feel that in our body
Right.
in profoundly dysregulating ways.
Yeah.
And I have had so many betrayed partners say to me, I've been through a lot in my life and nothing has messed me up like this.
Wow.
And I think in our culture, infidelity is also ubiquitous. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and
Yep.
because it happens frequently, I think sometimes we don't realize that how significant it is.
Right.
It's almost like you can get immune to something that happens a lot
Yes. Yeah.
and lose sight of
Desensitized to it.
how disruptive it is for people.
Yeah. So that being said, the fact that even though we may hate them and you feel betrayed, and now they basically pose a threat. How do you counsel couples on the decision to stay or go once you find out you've been betrayed? Because I think I would imagine that's probably something that is a big deal. Like, okay, do I end this relationship because of the betrayal, or I actually love this person, I want to have hope for this relationship? Do I stay, and what does that mean? Like, do you counsel couples through that?
Yeah, I think it's a huge question, and I think the question is bigger for the betrayed partner than maybe the betraying partner. I don't know. As I'm saying that, I'm like, I don't know if that's true, because I think the betraying partner, if they're not dealing with a compulsive behavior pattern, then they do have a decision to make about what they're doing with this affair, right?
Yeah.
But I think for the betrayed partner, the question is like, do I stay and try to repair? Could trust ever be rebuilt here? Or do I need to leave? And then we have a cultural story that's very prevalent in our culture that is, if somebody cheats on you, the way that you reclaim your dignity is you leave them. And so there's a lot of pressure from that cultural story.
Yeah.
I hear betrayed partners talk to me about this all the time, like, how could I stay? My partner is doing everything right.
Yeah.
They are working their tail off to repair the mess they made. They are in therapy. They're doing everything they're asked to do. They're showing up in the relationship differently. They're being the partner I longed for, but how can I stay with them and respect myself? And so that cultural story is very loaded for people.
Right.
And they have to often work through that and figure out, what do I actually need to do that's best for me? And I always say to people, in that cultural story, we actually give staying or leaving weight that we shouldn't give. Because you can stay out of a place of health, or you can leave out of a place of health.
Right.
And you can stay out of a place of sickness, or you can leave out of a place of sickness.
Right.
So there's much more about you figuring out what is best for me and what is going to let me live the healthiest life for me and what I want, give me most of what I want. And then I'm going to do that regardless of what the cultural story is, regardless of what other people who want to weigh in think.
Right.
I've got to do what's best for me.
Yeah.
And really helping people come back to themselves and sort that out.
Yeah. So I've had a burning question that I've been dying to ask you, because I've now thought about it. I've wondered about it for probably the better part of 10 years. And it stems from, I'm a divorce lawyer, I do litigation, and I was in this trial 10 plus years ago. It was actually probably 14 years ago. And to try and make a long story short, the issue in the trial was, had the parties separated or had they not? Because our position was they had separated, and wife was out gallivanting with all of her boyfriends very publicly. And wife's position, of course, was, I want to prolong the length of the marriage to get as much spousal support as I can. And so therefore we were married, and, I was just trying to work through my affairs type of thing. So it was an unusual trial in that the issue of infidelity was actually brought in the trial, which normally we absolutely do not do. It's completely irrelevant in a divorce proceeding. But for this particular issue, the date of separation, it actually became very relevant. And I will never forget that they brought in an expert, a marriage and family expert. The other side brought in a marriage and family expert, and she testified that having an affair can be really good for the marital relationship. And at the time, I was 14 years younger. I had been married 14 less years. Like, this was just the most shocking and asinine thing I had ever heard in my entire life, because I'm like, how could that possibly ever be true? But, I've since lived a little bit more life, learned a little bit more about the nuances of relationships. I've been married for 14 additional years, over 20 years now. And so I'm like, okay, maybe I shouldn't have been so quick to judge that, but I still don't know. It still seems kind of a shocking viewpoint. What is your take on that?
Yeah, I have a really strong opinion about that.
Okay, tell us what it is, if you don't mind.
So my opinion about it is that affairs are never an answer or a solution to anything. And the problem with having an affair is that it's always in secret.
Yeah.
So if we think about like defining, first of all, let's just define cheating. Cheating is breaking the sexual agreements in your relationship.
Yeah.
So you could be, and I have worked with clients who are in polyamorous relationships, and then there is cheating.
Right.
Or you could be in an open relationship and there's cheating, or you could be in a monogamous relationship and there's cheating. So cheating is about breaking the sexual agreements, but the problem with it is always one person unilaterally breaking the agreements.
Right.
And they do it in secret. And so what happens is the person who doesn't know is now living within and investing into a relationship that has completely changed and that they didn't agree to. So it alters their rights and it robs them of consent in the relationship. And so do couples go through the process of experiencing an affair and come out on the other side and rebuild something really strong? Yes. I mean, I
Okay.
see, and I would really want people to hear that like,
Yeah.
I mean, I literally can think of dozens and dozens and hundreds of couples that I have seen repair their relationships, not just after affairs, but after sexual addiction,
Yeah.
after 30
Okay.
years of chronic cheating. I mean,
Right.
I have seen amazing stories of rebuilding.
Okay. That
However,
sounds very hopeful. Okay.
however,
However, there's a however there. Okay.
however, the level of damage that you do by taking away someone else's rights and by hiding all of this is enormous. And so to me, from that standpoint, I would never be like having an affair is a benefit to a relationship.
Right.
Having an affair is something you then have to get over.
Yeah.
And you have to do that through a tremendous amount of heavy lifting.
Right.
And it's because of what you've done in terms of violating the trust and the rights of the other person
Yeah.
in the relationship.
So speaking of that heavy lifting, it sounds like you agree, like rebuilding is possible, staying in the relationship and creating something beautiful and hopeful and true and honest is possible. How do you do that? How does the betrayed partner get over the betrayal?
So I always say to the betrayed partners that I work with that their own individual healing is not dependent on their partner.
Okay.
They can heal. However, the healing of the relationship is a two-person job. There's no way for them to do the work to heal the relationship all by themselves. So if we're talking about the relationship healing, that is both people, both feet in, working on repairing it.
Yeah.
And, if there's addiction present, then they're in addiction treatment and you're in a whole process of understanding what was underneath the addiction, which is usually trauma, working through the trauma stuff, all of that. If
Yeah.
it's a traditional affair, then you're doing the work around like what happened here? How did I end up over here? And then how do I now come back into this relationship and how do we repair this and rebuild it together?
Okay.
But both people have to be really invested in that. So it's not just up to the betrayed partner to get over it.
Okay. But I think in your book, you do really have some support, healthy coping strategies, right? And in the book, it talks about 7 helpful coping strategies, focus on calming our bodies, build an alternative safe base. What does that mean? What does that one mean?
So the part of the book that you're in and talking about right now is kind of like healthy coping strategies for early on. So this would
Okay.
be sort of early on when
When you
you as a
find
betrayed
out and you're
partner,
just spiraling.
you've discovered all of it. It's sent your whole system into dysregulation. You're super activated. You're not sleeping. You're not eating.
Yeah.
You're having intrusive thoughts. You're, all of that. And so all of those coping skills that you're like calming your body, doing everything you can do to help regulate your nervous system. The alternative safe base is about, the person who you would normally turn to for comfort and
Yeah.
support is now the person who's hurt you.
Yeah.
And so you can't turn to them in the way that you normally would. So you need other people to turn to.
Yeah.
So you need to really build people around you who can support you, even while if you're going to repair with this person while you do that, or if you're trying to decide, am I going to stay or leave? That's going to be a period of time that you're going to make that decision in.
Yeah.
You need a lot of support to help regulate your nervous system because you can't turn to your partner.
Right.
Your partner is actually going to be dysregulating for you often. So you have to turn to therapists, 12-step groups, group therapy meetings, online community support, best friends,
Yeah.
all the people in
Yeah.
your life, and really lean into them and help
Okay.
let them help you.
And then you have one, again, as part of these strategies, name shame to tame shame. Tell us a little bit about what that means.
So for most people who experience betrayal, there's almost like an immediate transfer of shame onto them. So most people who experience betrayal immediately start to feel like they have somehow done something. It's some lack in them
Yeah.
that has made their partner decide to cheat
Okay.
or their partner decide to betray them in some way.
Yeah.
So that shame really quickly attaches itself to betrayed partners. And it's really important to just understand that phenomenon is really normal. It's not surprising, happens to everybody, but we need to name it. And then we need to talk about it in terms of that it's actually what we call carried shame.
Okay.
It doesn't actually belong to you. It's come over and you're carrying it. And you actually need to give it back and release it because it doesn't belong to you.
Yeah. Wow. And then it says create space for our anger. I think that's somewhat, we understand that. Eliminate the doghouse. What does that one mean?
So when someone is cheating, when they've broken the sexual agreements and they've done what I talked about earlier about, they've altered the relationship in a unilateral way. When you do that, you're taking a one-up position in your relationship. You've taken a power over position because you now know things about the relationship that your partner doesn't know, and yet you're acting as though all things are as they always were.
Right.
So you've taken a power over position. So when infidelity is discovered and the cheating is discovered, often the pendulum swings and the betrayed partner who has been in a power under, they go into power over. And they start to exert power over.
Okay.
And that's, again, normal, and we see this pendulum swing all the time. But if you stay there, if you're in power over or power under, you can't be relational. So in order to heal, you have to kind of come out of power over and come back into like we're on a level playing field together.
Okay.
That does not mean that you don't use your voice. It doesn't mean that you don't hold the person responsible and accountable, but you're not in a power over, you cheated on me and now I can treat you however I want. I
Right.
can talk to you however I want. I can demand whatever I want.
Yeah.
That kind of dynamic, because that's just
Right.
switching positions.
Got it. Okay. And then take our power back and set and maintain effective boundaries. What boundaries are useful for someone in that position that has just found out they've been betrayed?
So it depends on your situation.
Okay.
I think the biggest thing that I always want people to understand about boundaries is I think people think that boundaries are a way to control another person.
Okay.
Like I'm giving you a boundary, you need to go do this,
Yeah.
and that's not a boundary.
Okay.
So the only thing that we can ever do, the only person we can control is ourselves. And so the only thing we can do in our relationship is make requests. So for example, you might say to your partner, hey, this is like the 8th time you've cheated on me, so I need you to now go get evaluated to see if there's an addiction here. Because this is starting to look really compulsive and out of control to me. So I need you to go see somebody who's trained in evaluating this, who has credentials. And that's what I need you to do. That's a request.
Yeah.
Your boundary then is, here's what I will need to do to take care of me. So your boundary is always about you and your behavior. So
Okay.
you might say to your partner, hey, this is my request. If you're not willing to do that, this is the 8th time.
Yeah.
So I'm going to need to separate. I
Okay.
can't keep living in a relationship where I keep being cheated on. That's not good for me.
Yeah.
So if you're unwilling to meet my request, then this is what have to do to take care of me.
Right.
But you're not like punishing the other person. You're not telling the other person you're taking care of yourself,
Yeah.
given what they're doing with the requests.
Okay. Do you think it's possible for 100% trust to be restored in a relationship that has gone through this betrayal?
I think that when people have gone through betrayal, I think a lot of times people go into relationships and they sort of, this is just my opinion, but they sort of trust naively or innocently, if that makes sense.
Okay.
They sort of go in and they think, this is how I am in the relationship, so you must be that way too.
Right.
And this is just what we're doing. And there's a little bit of I don't know if the right word is naive. I don't know what the word is. I don't think you ever go back to that kind of trust.
Okay.
I think after betrayal, you're in a different kind of awareness. You're in a different kind of awareness about that you and your partner are really actually two separate people.
Right.
They're not just operating the way you operate in the world. You're different people. You have different wiring.
Yeah.
And I don't think you ever lose the awareness that your partner could go off the rails and do that again.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that you don't trust them. Like I've worked with a lot of couples who, they're not spending time thinking about, are you cheating on me anymore? Like I'm thinking about a couple that, there's like 30 years of cheating in their relationship that I'm working with, but like they don't talk about that and they're not thinking about it. They're thinking about like, how are we communicating?
Okay.
Are we like rebuilding something really cool sexually? Are we like, how are we doing with like our past trauma together when we trigger it? They're working on the relational stuff now. They're not focused on this other piece anymore. There was a period of time where they were, but they've moved through it.
Beyond it. Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Huh. We are just about out of time. If you had to just share one thing for people that have been betrayed, that are enduring this right now, or, have in the past, if you had to share one thing to help them, what would it be?
I would say that number one, healing is possible. And I think healing lays in the direction of really reclaiming and rebuilding a relationship with yourself. Often in betrayal, there's like a disconnection and separation, and we actually start to mistrust ourselves.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of healing is about reclaiming your sense of self and your trust with yourself, and then taking that into your relationships in a different way.
Beautiful. It always comes down to the internal work, I tell ya, on pretty much everything. Wow.
Yeah, it really, really does. Yeah.
Well, Michelle, thank you so much for writing this book and being here today. It was a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
I've got just a little bit more to say. I'll be dang, guys, if it's not another episode where it really comes down to doing the internal work. Like, it's fascinating. Of all the issues, cheating, being cheated on, like you would think, oh, that's definitely something that depends on the other person. No, it always comes back to doing the internal work within ourselves, for ourselves, by ourselves. And I think the longer I live and the more I do Made for More and the more I learn from all of these amazing guests, one of the thoughts that's forming and formulating in my mind, and I'm starting to really see how true and significant it is, that I really think the quality of your life depends largely in part on how much internal work you've done on yourself. So do the internal work and never ever forget you were made for more.